Well, hello everybody. Welcome to the latest e-commerce explored webinar. It is a treat to have you all out there watching in. We are talking conversion rates this time, not necessarily conversion rate optimization, although I suspect we'll get into it, but all the things that go into improving your conversion rates and how the best people are doing that in 2025, what the latest tips and tricks are. Very cool to have you guys tuning in live, and we'll be joined by the panelists very soon. But what we would love is some of your questions to answer. So please, you should find a box somewhere very close to where you're watching this webinar, which is the comments area. And that is where I would love you to feed in your questions about conversion rate optimization and improving conversion rates as we go through this. Just to check it's working, I would also love you all to drop me a line in there about where you're tuning in from. I think we managed 4 continents for the last one of these, so I'm wondering if we can manage to do that again. Panelists, you're welcome to add in where you're tuning in from as well in the comments box if you want to get involved. Whilst those are slowly coming through, I would also say when it comes to the questions, please ask. The brilliant first question. Hey, Eileen, yes, the recording should be available by tomorrow morning. And given you're in New York City, you should have it by the time you wake up tomorrow, which is very cool. Christine is here from Dublin. She's one of our panelists. Thomas is tuning in from London. So we've got 3 countries and 2 continents so far. So the thing I was going to say about questions was send those questions in sooner rather than later, because what people have the habit of doing is umming and ahhing about asking a question until 10 minutes to go. And at 10 minutes to go, the chances of me managing to get your question asked are pretty slim. But so if you're umming and ahhing, if you've got a question, just fire it over to me via the comments box, and I will do my best to get the panelists to give you some awesome answers. So I said so too many times today. I apologize. I've been on a train most of the day, and then it's been a very weird day for a webinar day. So excuse all the so's as we go through this. Maybe I'll edit them out for the replay. Okay. Let's find out who our panelists are. She says, losing her slide deck. So we have the brilliant Will Laurenson from Customers Who Click. You may know him from his podcast. We've got Thomas Ryan from Descriptomiser, which is a brilliant piece of tech for improving your conversion rates that isn't a CRO tool exactly. Very, very cool. Got to catch up with Thomas about that on a podcast not very long ago. And then we've also got Christine Corbin, who's all-round genius at improving conversion rate. So you have a stellar panel to ask your questions of in this one. So I want those questions coming in. Shall we meet them? Let's meet them. Okay, let me bring them all up. Whilst they're getting acclimatized to being here on the stage, just a quick hello to Mark Anthony from Cape Town, South Africa. That's our 3rd continent. Thank you, Mark Anthony, for joining us. And Gethin, who's in Cardiff, great to have you here. So we're on 3 continents, and we've got 1, 2, 3 parts of the islands of Great Britain, or is it the United Kingdom? No, it's Great Britain is the bit that I get confused with the geographical terminology. But we've got Ireland, we've got Wales, we've got England, we've got Cornwall, if you count me. Is anyone Scottish tuning in? Or that's what we're missing. Okay, before I completely go off on a weird geographical tangent, let's get our panelists to introduce themselves. Christine, I'll come to you first, and then we'll go clockwise around the screen. So Christine, please let the audience know who you are, what you do, and why you're a genius at CRO.
Hi, everyone. I'm Christine. So I am a consultant and soloist, and I do e-commerce marketing, focusing on CRO and SEO. And I primarily work with fashion and beauty brands. My corporate background is in women's wear and fine jewelry, and those are still my first loves. So yeah, very happy to be here. Thanks for having me, Chloe.
Awesome to have you here. Love a bit of fashion and jewelry specialism as well. Complicated verticals to get right.
It is,
Thomas, Thomas, your intro, please.
Thank you, Chloe. Nice to be with you all. At Descriptomiser, we track user behavior in order to identify why people convert or abandoned. We segment all of that information by traffic source, device, and analysis of the content we see them engaging with on the website. And this helps our AI models to make CRO recommendations every day.
Told you all it was something a little bit different that Thomas is bringing to the mix for this session. Will, please let the audience know a bit more about yourself.
Hi, I'm Will. I run Customers Who Click. We're a full-service CRO agency purely for e-com. So we do everything from landing pages, customer research, upsells, bundles, basically everything. I also host the Customers Who Click podcast. We've just hit, I think episode 229 came out today. So I'm quite happy with that.
Very cool. Congratulations. Every podcast episode released is an achievement. I know how much effort they take. So 229 is very, very good. Okay, let's get to the first big question I have for you all, which is, I would like each of you to complete this sentence. The best way to improve conversion rates in e-commerce in 2025 is. Who fancies jumping in first on this one? I'm going to pick on you, Will, if no one's jumping in.
I don't think it's changed. I think it's still research and testing. That just has to be the basis for everything you do, really. If you don't go and understand what your customers care about, then it's going to be difficult to improve your conversion rates. You can dive into the data and you can figure out where the problems are on your website. You can look at heat maps and session recordings. You can see what people are doing. But until you speak to them, you don't know why they decided to take those actions, why they decided to drop off, why they have problems on the website. And so you'll still end up kind of guessing what you're doing. You might have narrowed it down to a specific area of the website, but you're still then taking a guess at what actually needs to be changed.
So we're talking copy improvements, tone improvements, emotional improvements, those sorts of things, rather than moving a button from the left to the right or a color change, just to really dumb down the question for you.
Most of the time, yes. I think it comes down to, obviously, every now and again you get some feedback saying I just didn't have a clue how to configure this thing or whatever, and it is a bit of a technical thing, or I couldn't find the product I wanted, or I didn't understand the sizing or whatever, that sort of thing. But yeah, most of the time it comes down to I always talk about usability, anxiety, motivation. Anxiety is just all the information they need about a product, but if you answer all the questions, you get people to the stage where they go, okay, cool, it's a product that fits my needs, and that's it. Like, all right, cool, I'll have a think about it. What we want to do, the motivation piece, is the bit that gets them going, okay, it fits all my needs and I want to get this now. Right. And that's the bit where you have to actually talk to people to find out why they want this thing. Right. An example I always go back to is I bought a standing desk. Right. Standing desks can sound really boring. It's a desk. Right. So it needed certain dimensions. It needed a minimum, weight capacity. And I was umming and ahhing between whether I want a manual desk or an electric desk, because they both have their pros and cons. So I found various desks that fitted the need and fit the requirements. But it took me ages to actually pull the trigger because none of them made me go, okay, well, actually, this is the desk I want. Right? There's loads of standing desks out there. In fact, sorry, the better example, how did I forget this because I'm wearing it? The better example is True Classic, right? True Classic doing probably 500 million a year now in revenue, selling plain t-shirts and whatever the ones these are called. I can't remember what these are called.
T-shirts with
the long sleeve ones with the buttons. So they, you could bit of thing. You can buy these on Amazon for probably £6-7 for really cheap ones, or you can buy True Classic ones for 20-25. Right, so they've done something with their marketing and their positioning, all the information, the video content that they have in their advertising and on their website is what's the difference between it's a t-shirt and it's the t-shirt that I want to buy because it's going to make me look great.
Nice. I like that example. Makes me think of my recent treadmill purchase, where like all of them could do what I wanted. So I just almost randomly stuck my finger on the screen and went, I'll take that one, because I couldn't see a way to differentiate between them, which would cause a lot of
Yeah.
customers to get confused and not actually do anything. But I really
And-
need to up my step
and
count.
you just wait, right? You've got loads of options, and you thought, okay, well, they all fit my need, but I don't know which one to buy, and so you don't buy any of them.
Okay, so Will's way to end this sentence is that we need to ask the customers and do the testing. Thomas, Christine, any alterations on that? Who wants to go next? Christine, go for it.
Well, I think I would have given a different answer even just a few weeks ago. But in light of sort of the global climate and uncertainty at the moment regarding tariffs and all these kinds of things, I actually think one really underrated way to improve conversion rates in 2025 is going to be really focusing on building customer trust. I think we're going to need to really differentiate brands. Obviously, price likely cannot always be the key differentiator. I think there's a lot of uncertainty right now around like sort of the global supply chain, but I think things that we can emphasize are like, what is our return policy? What does our warranty policy look like? How easy is it for you to make this purchase? And then if you're not happy with it, how easy is it for us to make that right? And really communicating that at like the product page level, the homepage level, but all the way through the checkout process, and just making it like as smooth and simplified as possible, highlighting UGC. But I think that like that trust building is going to become such an important differentiator, even more so than usual.
I love that angle, and I can see it makes me think of like there's times in e-commerce or times in recent global history where we've all as consumers become weirdly expert in something you would never have thought we'd have become expert in. Like you ask people 20 years ago in the UK, who's your favorite courier, and they wouldn't 99% of them wouldn't have an answer. Now they will wax on about the problems of every, or why DPD is brilliant, or vice versa, often area dependent. I can see them becoming very focused on where are you shipping this from and what's the duty situation, becoming very much I'm not sure if you're UK, US, where you're actually based. Where are you physically based? I think is going to become something customers are increasingly looking out for. Will, you look like you're looking eager to come in on this one.
So we ran a few tests around this sort of messaging a little while ago, and found that if you introduce the slightest bit of doubt in their mind about the message that you put on the site, they would go and investigate. So we tested out a returns policy, and we were trying to make a really appealing returns policy on the product page, and kind of ignoring the fact that actually you had to pay some charges and things. So we weren't saying it was free returns. We were just saying hassle-free returns, or something like that, right? So because you just got in touch and said, I want to return it, and the company would say, cool, we'll get that done for you. But we found that just having hassle-free returns and not free returns got more people to click and go and explore what the actual returns policy was, and then they found out that there were charges involved. And so we actually, because we tracked the interaction rate, so people who didn't click it did convert a bit better. Sorry, did I say didn't? People who didn't click it converted better. People who clicked on it and went to view the policy, conversion rate was absolutely terrible. So I completely agree. Like, you've got to be transparent. You've got to give all this information and do what you can to build trust. But you just got to be so careful now, because people are savvy, and if you just misword it slightly, people will jump on it and go try and work out what you actually mean.
Very cool. Now, Thomas, how would you end this sentence? The best way to improve conversion rates in 2025 is.
I mean, a lot of ground has been covered. So to try and say something original and I guess bring the 2025 bit into it, I think something that I see a lot of opportunity with everyone I work with that they tend not to be doing is taking all of the metrics that they do have and looking at how you can segment them further. So, whether that's conversion rates and breaking it down by, all of the different device types, not just mobile, desktop, but the actual iPhone 15, iPhone 12, Galaxy 8, whatever it might be, looking at the on-page behavior depending on the ad sets or the individual ads even. And once you start breaking down the core metrics that you track anyway, once you start breaking them down even further by those sort of segmentations, you will generally see outliers and anomalies that weren't apparent before. And very often within those either lays the clue to where you can bring up the average across the board, or actually just see where one particular area or one particular journey is affecting things egregiously. I would try to look for stuff like that. And with a nod and a wink to it being 2025, I think introducing a little bit of AI to your analysis, at least, you're gonna, in a scenario like what I described, you're gonna have tons of data, whether it's in spreadsheets or databases. If you can find a good way to feed that into some kind of an AI model to draw conclusions and insights on, you're probably going to be using AI more productively than 99% of people.
I like that take. Both Will and Christine are nodding away there, so I'm going to deviate from my little mini slide deck and ask a question: what's the best way of using AI in conversion rate improvements at the moment? Are you using it? Are you not using it? Christine, you first. Sorry to jump on you there.
No, you're good. I am still very much in the phase of AI usage where I'm using it more for like data analysis. And I've actually been starting to use it a lot more in my SEO efforts than my CRO efforts. So I would describe myself as AI curious, and it's something my clients have been starting to ask about, but we have not implemented any AI powered apps as of yet. But for as far as like test analysis and doing like multi-armed tests, I think that AI is super useful for just kind of understanding metrics. And the other thing that I sometimes like to use AI for is just literally ideation. Like, as in, literally, sometimes I'll just upload a screenshot of my client site and be like, here's what I'm thinking. Do you see anything that I haven't seen? Which may sound really basic, but to be honest, I find it really useful to just kind of augment my brain power.
Love that. So analysis and help me get past the white page, basically. That.
Yeah, ideation. Yeah, totally.
Yeah, the ideation thing. Will, how about you?
Yeah, kind of similar. So we use it a lot, almost like all the time. It's kind of constantly open, just in case I use it to kind of bounce ideas. It's almost like a colleague, that colleague that you just like to annoy and distract all the time whenever you've got a question. So I use it a lot, but yeah, it's mainly for analysis. So it's mainly for giving it all the data and saying, can you just do this 1,000 times quicker than we'd be able to do this ourselves? And a little bit in a similar way where you said, just upload a screenshot. And we found that, yeah, if you prompt it correctly, you can get some really good insight from it. So whether you use a custom GPT that you've given a load of information to, so it's basically a CRO expert, or just giving it that prompt and saying, here are some things I've identified and why I've identified them as potential opportunities. What do you think? What else have you spotted? And kind of getting it to challenge you and make other suggestions, I found really good. But if you just say, my client's add to cart rate is low, they're in the skincare category, can you please make some suggestions? It just throws out some generic rubbish that you probably read on a lot of blogs as like best practice and stuff, but it's not going to get you anywhere because, like, again, it's not based on any actual data or customer feedback.
So we're saying don't use it to write your conversion rate strategy for the next few months, because that's way too high level. Thomas, you brought this topic up. Any other tips you're finding it particularly useful for, you'd recommend using it for?
Yeah, well, I think it's great for analyzing big data in particular. So like what's been mentioned are obviously, great examples of, working out an idea or building out on a concept that you've got. But I think that sometimes it's actually more powerful when, if you've literally got a spreadsheet of 1,000 rows that you couldn't possibly sort of decipher yourself at a glance, at least, pass that into it, obviously with the right prompts, as Will suggested. and give it a clear direction. I know a big thing with it is being explicit, that you're not asking it to make assumptions or draw on best practice, because it's rarely best practice. It's usually something that it's, I guess, crawled from a dubious blog somewhere. But if you do that, we find it can identify things very quickly that you just couldn't do on your own as a human.
Which is seems to be what it's absolutely best for. Will, you've got a quick one to add?
Just to add to that, it's a bit of a separate example, but podcast stuff is a great example of this, about being really specific with what you're asking it to do. So I ask my custom GPT to pull out 10 key quotes and insights from the guest and 10 from me from every transcript, along with a few other bits of content I need it to produce. Everything else is perfect. It will give me a long summary of the episode. It will give me a description of the episode titles, everything like that. It will give me a list of tools that have been pulled out. Almost every single quote is summarized or paraphrased, or it's taken an idea from the transcript and written its own quote. And it's the one thing that I can't get it to do properly. But to Thomas's point of, you do have to be quite clear and say, don't think about this. Don't I'm not asking you to make suggestions or anything. Just tell me what this data is showing. I think that's quite important, because otherwise it can just make stuff up.
Before you take me off down a podcaster's problems angle, which I could quite easily disappear off on that tangent, we're going to move on to the next thing I wanted to pose to you guys. And whilst you're quickly reading it to refresh yourselves, just a reminder to the audience, if you've got questions about conversion rate optimization, you've got a sense now of the expertise of our guests. So now would be a great time to be putting those questions into the comment box. I'm sure you've got some. I mean, I've got plenty enough to keep us going for the full hour. But if you've got questions, now would be a great time to be sending them through to me. So this statement of mine is one that I've been thinking about for a while, and which I added to this based on a post that Thomas Ryan, one of our panelists, actually put up about how conversion rate is kind of a fake metric. So Thomas, I'm going to come to you for your take on this one first, given it was prompted by, or no AI pun intended, it was a direct link from your post that led to this. Let me just quickly read it out for everybody first, though. It's that headline conversion rates have always been a distraction. The real story is always in the detail, the channel, the traffic source, the screen, the device, etc. Thomas, what would you say to that? Right, wrong? What else should we be thinking about?
Well, you definitely want to think about the headline conversion rate. So that was obviously a little bit clickbaity as a leading as an opener. However, it doesn't tell you very much, in my opinion, that you can take direct action on. I'll just give you a really simple example. We had a client where we broke down the add to bag rates by device, and I'm talking specific device, so iPhone 15, iPhone X, all of that. And we were able to break it into about 5 tiers. The highest tier having an add to bag rate of, I think it was 15 to 20%, then down to 10 to 15. And so the kind of overall point being, there was a ton of devices where the add to bag rate was below 5%, and there was a ton where it was above 15. And within that range, what is the overall add to bag rate or conversion rate as a metric? When if you kind of scratch beneath the surface like that, you start uncovering all of this information. Now within that, you will tend to see, and I've seen it across many clients, the more expensive the device, often the higher the conversion rate will be. So you kind of want to take those out of the mix also, not to skew the overall numbers, and start even grouping devices economically, especially with expensive products. And once you start doing that, if you see outliers even within those ranges, then that's when you can start looking, all right, because the core information is the same, more or less the content hierarchy is going to be the same. You would expect the interactions and the forms, etc., are going to be the same. So then it's going to be, I guess, what's above the fold. So that's when you might want to start really paying attention to bounce rate, because if two devices where I would say all else being equal, the value of the device, the kind of nature of how they get there, the general layout, if two of them have significantly different add to bag rates or even just conversion rates, something is happening that's driving that difference. And I guess I may be a little bit more website centric in my approach than what other people will be, just because that's where my interest is. But you can do quite a lot with what you've already got just by standardizing what's already working. And the only way you're going to achieve that is by kind of ignoring what your overall conversion rate is, which is where I guess the genesis of that post came from.
Nice example. I feel like I need a few minutes to fully digest everything you said then, Thomas, but I thought that was awesome. Thank you. Christine, what do you think on this?
Absolutely. Well, the first thing that came to mind for me is just how, despite it being 2025, I still feel that I will land on an ecom website and it'll be so well optimized on the desktop view. And then I go to the mobile view and it's like just still really lagging in comparison. And it's been a problem I've noticed with clients as well. So yeah, for me, I immediately went to device type because I think one of the key things that can be so easy to forget about, especially for like new brands just getting launched, they're so excited about the mock-ups from the UX designer, and they're really looking at the big, beautiful desktop mock-ups. And I feel like mobile can lag. And to me, I think it's so important to think about that above the fold mobile real estate. And if you are conveying what you need to convey to customers before they ever even have to start scrolling on their phones. And often when I just briefly look at websites on my phone, the answer is like, no, the information isn't there. There's like no shoppable products above the fold. Like there's no price, there's no add to cart button. So that was my immediate first thought, because I often see big divides between desktop versus mobile conversion rates for my clients. And I think we're still lagging there, even in 2025.
It's kind of mad, isn't it? How
Yeah.
I mean, I get the get out of jail free card on this because this habit wise, because most of my audience, so brands, etc., come to my websites on desktop. We're like 90% desktop still. So I get to be lazy, look at my websites on desktop, optimize them on desktop, and completely ignore the mobile platforms. I'll put my hands up and say I do it. But the fact that there's lots of brands and retailers who are only looking at their website in the way they use it day to day on their big
Yeah.
screen and not getting the mobile. I mean, if I was running a brand, I would have in the office the handsets, the top 3 handsets that my customers were using, and we would be testing everything on those handsets.
I know.
It wouldn't be, oh, I think Mary in accounts has got the right iPhone. It would be, we'd bought them, they sat on the desks, everyone's constantly looking at them. But I'm about to get ranty, which is not what anybody's tuned in for. Will, your take on the stats, on the rates?
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, we commonly see 70% plus traffic on mobile now, on the brands we work with. So I have a mobile simulator app in Chrome, and so I would just make sure that I click that basically every time I go to a website to make sure it's in mobile mode, and I'm actually browsing it on mobile most of the time. The thing we actually start with, and this will probably answer Casey's question at the same time, hopefully, we look at the conversion funnel first. So we look at what percentage traffic is visiting a product page, how much of that adds to cart, how much of that starts checkout and then completes checkout. So we'll identify where there are noticeable drops in that, and then we will start to dig into it further, right? So we'll look at, okay, well, if now we know that add to cart, or we think that add to cart is the big problem, so we'll go investigate, well, how does add to cart look on mobile versus desktop? And then how does that break down by channel as well? And then that starts to really help us work out what to fix. Because again, you can work out that mobile is your problem, but you still need to work out, well, where on the website is mobile a problem? What traffic is the problem? It's probably Meta, to be honest, and take it from there. So yeah, we find that looking at the funnel normally first, but yeah, otherwise sometimes it can be, once we've decided, well, mobile is the area to look at, we'll look at what's the funnel for mobile looking like.
It is kind of like pulling back those areas. And I giggled when you said meta is usually the problem, because back when I looked at such things, Google shopping campaigns were almost always the problem. So much traffic, so few conversions, which made sense in the ad campaigns, but made no sense at all on the website. We'll go to, as you suggested, Will, let's go to answering Casey's question. Which is, how do you find the right places to test on your website? Fastest way to identify friction points in the customer journey. We've had Will's take. Christine, what would be your take when you're starting with a new client? Where do you work out where to make the best impact quickest?
Totally. So I agree with Will. You need to understand your funnels, the processes that you have set up to get customers from A to B, whether they be coming in from social, whether they be coming in from paid ads, organic traffic. There's so many entry points that you can start from. And so I'd start by looking at our assumptions around the ideal customer journey. And then I really like to use heat map tracking tools and actually like just download and watch lots of user behavior, both mobile and desktop, obviously. And I like to just start by looking at like click behavior and also just like bounce rates and what pages people are actually exiting on. So those are, I guess, three main things. But for example, like I had a client recently who they have one product that does really well in organic. It constantly comes up on Google and it gets a lot of click through. And they were like, why does this page have a 70% bounce rate, which was like significantly higher than a lot of other product pages. And that was something that like, it turns out that basically after some iteration, we found that the hero image on this product page, it was just way too dark. Like customers couldn't like it didn't look good, to be honest. And had we not like gone through that specific funnel of noticing that there was an organic trend around this page, and then also looking at the customer behavior of like, oh, they're kind of like clicking on this image, but there's no other images in this carousel and it's kind of dark, like the exposure's a bit off perhaps. And like then they were just like bouncing away and being like, this site has nothing for me. So yeah, I don't know. I guess that was hopefully that answers. There's just multiple places that you can start from, but I think, yeah, really like examining your own assumptions and then cross-referencing that with like the actual user behavior data that you have is going to be really helpful.
But I think it's complicated, as you both outlined, but that's the key thing to know. It's a mix of looking at the analytics data and spotting problems, a mix of thinking about the customer journey and the most bought products, all that kind of stuff, and then a mix of actually screen capturing what people are doing to see where they're, it's so cool, because 15 years ago we'd have gone, get your mum to try and do it and stand over and try not to tell her what to do. Now we can actually just record the customers and get the real point of view. So I love that. Thomas, would your answer to this be improve your product copy, or would you go somewhere else with it?
I would go somewhere else, to be honest. One of the things I like to track is most frequently last viewed element, either before an abandonment or a conversion. So, for example, if on a product page, are people bouncing most frequently before? Is the last thing they've seen the carousel, or is it the product description, or is it product details, or some FAQs? And equally track what they're most frequently viewing at prior to hitting add to bag. And that usually tells you a few things. Number one, it draws your attention to what works well on your site as well as what doesn't, but where you see anomalies then between different products. So if typically the carousel is not a trigger to abandonment, but it is on one product, are the images different on here? Is the sequence of the carousel somewhat different? Equally with the FAQs, if people are more likely to click add to bag if they've looked at a particular FAQ, maybe there's something that in that FAQ that is reassuring enough that the rest of the page isn't doing an adequate job of convincing the user on. So that, a simple conclusion to take from an outcome like that would be, all right, whatever's in that FAQ needs to be promoted up to, whether it be the header or at least somewhere above the fold. So last viewed item before a particular action, there's a load of gold in that for whatever outcome you're looking for.
And you're not just looking at last viewed page, you're looking at last viewed thing on page.
No, it has to, especially on an e-commerce store, because you could have thousands of products, and even if you've only got 10, they're all content-wise, they're all going to be different. and knowing that the add to bag rate isn't good enough. Don't get me wrong, it's a great starting point, and very often it's a UX problem or user interface. But once you've maxed that out, what do you do at that point? Well, it's probably down to what the user is seeing. And these days, pretty much everyone knows how to use a website, especially if it's built on Shopify. The number of people who are struggling to, how do I add this to my basket? It's relatively low. It's a case of convincing them. And look, there's obviously the kind of best practice pieces of information and reassurances to put on the page. But if your product's particularly unique, or if there's some doubt that maybe is specific to your product, tracking what is actually the last thing people have looked at before a particular action is going to probably have the biggest impact after your basic UX best practice.
Nice. Okay. Love that question. Thank you, Casey. Love the answers too. So anyone else who's got questions, please fire them into us. For now, though, we've got another one of mine coming up, which is really going to tax you guys now. You're going to have to create your own questions here, which is, can you complete this sentence? The question I'm getting asked about conversion rates the most at the moment is, Christine, can I put you on the spot first, please?
Sure. So yeah, recently, and I know I already touched on this, but I have gotten a lot of questions from clients around mobile responsiveness. And yeah, again, I think it goes back to, we really need to be so careful with what is and isn't presented above the fold. Like, user attention spans are so brief these days. And as Thomas mentioned, it can be down to really nitpicky things like the quality of the assets. And like as I said earlier, it just literally, is an image too dark? Is it not like appealing enough? But yeah, I've had so many clients who come to me and just after a bit of working together, it just becomes so clear that their mobile site just isn't performing as it needs to. And then as a little bonus, I'll add, I've also gotten a lot of questions recently about checkout functionality and streamlining it, especially for my clients who are not already on Shopify. So I think I think again with the attention span thing, it's really all about streamlining and making it as simple as possible and just giving the critical information very fast.
So it's the biggies, checkout
Yeah.
and mobile. Okay, Thomas,
Yeah.
anything different you're hearing?
No, nothing different. I mean, if I try and think of a conversation that's come up quite regularly, that I feel like had died down a little bit over the last few years, was how important is page speed and how quickly the page loads. And I think there's some general consensus that if it's in or around the 2 seconds, you're probably affording yourself the ability to get as much on the page as you want to without taking too long. But it's always the same question, really, is how do we make it higher? That's what comes up all the time.
Will, so I'm not sure there's anything left for you here. We've had how do you make it faster? We've had mobile. We've had I've forgotten Christine's first one. Clearly having a brain fog day. And we've had mobile and we've had mobile speed. Anything else, or is one of those the go-to that you're hearing from clients at the moment?
Speed does turn up a lot, but also just that question of like, what's a good conversion rate? It just always gets asked, and it's, well, it completely depends, doesn't it? It depends on what products you're selling, at what price point, where you're advertising them, what that user journey looks like, and various things like that. So that's one. But then the other one it's not really a question, but this expectation that a lot of what we do with CRO and A/B testing is basically UX UI changes, and that's it. And that it's just about moving stuff around on the page and trying to make it easier to use. When actually, and I remember this came up from a brand doing about $40 million. They were asking me about it, and basically when I started explaining the whole anxiety motivation piece, we've got to get people excited about the products on the website to keep them moving through the funnel and then make that purchase. And then we're kind of like, well, but isn't that what the ads are for? That's what the marketing does. Marketing gets people excited, hooks them in. I'm like, yeah, the job of your ad is to get a click. That's it. That's all it does. it gets the click and gets someone to your website. Your website then has to continue that excitement that they had in the ad, drive them through your website and get them to purchase. So, and not a lot of that is UX UI tweaks. Most of it is messaging, images, and just getting people to take that action now, rather than just thinking, like I said earlier, with like the standing desk and stuff. Yeah, okay, this fits my needs, but do I want to buy it right now? Right? We never want someone thinking, do I actually need this? We want someone clicking it because they went, oh, that looks good, I want that. And the website journey has continuously reinforced that and got them to the point where they go, okay, I can afford it. It meets my requirements. I'm not allergic to anything, or like there's nothing in it that I don't agree with. I want to buy it. Let's get it. And ideally, especially if you're in the UK, it's going to be next day shopping, next day delivery even, right? You can have this, it's like, I found it's such an easy way to get people to just get over the line once they're pretty much there. Just seeing that message, which is, if you buy this within the next hour or so, you're going to get it tomorrow. It gets people over the line and makes a big difference, but only if you have excited them about the product and got them through that process properly.
Sorry, I'm giggling because I was about to bring another question for the audience up, but we've had the brilliant statement from one of the. I think I could have this could be on my gravestone. I think I have to say it depends around 10 to 15 times a day. Welcome to the world of marketing. Everything's in it depends. But so Jack, thank you for that. You made me giggle. Right, we've had a brilliant question in from Mark Anthony, who Christine, I'm going to come to you first on this because I know you do a lot of both SEO and CRO, so this is fully in your wheelhouse. The blog question, the storytelling question on an e-commerce site. Do we need to be doing blogs and storytelling for a conversion rate fact, or is it just for SEO? Mark Anthony's seen contradictory A/B tests with some client websites converting best with direct product listings only versus others showing sustainability messaging and storytelling. What do we do? Because there's, in the ad space, in the email space, in the traffic space, there's a lot of talk about storytelling, emotion, etc. What's your take on blogs and storytelling with CRO?
Chloe, it depends. No, sorry. That was a little joke for you. No, totally. Obviously, or maybe not obviously, I believe in the e-com space that blogs have so much SEO utility still, despite someone posting blogs and SEO are dead on LinkedIn every 30 seconds. I'd say for me, if they have conversion rate utility, it honestly does depend on several things, including, in my opinion, the specific product category and also the price point. So, for example, if we're marketing a luxury product, like a several €1,000 handbag, let's say, I think that there's going to be a lot more utility in providing that sustainability messaging and really like doing a deep dive on like how is this produced, like down to the specific factory or producer, or like where exactly did this leather come from, for example. And I think with that kind of audience, you're going to see a lot more appetite for very specific granular detail. And I think that another situation where blog content can aid in conversions is if you're on a site with kind of like niche products and also a wide catalog. So one thing I'm thinking of that I saw recently is like the Sephora website, for example, famously giant product catalog. I noticed that in some of their menus, in their product subcategories, they will highlight blog posts showing how to use different products and different products that are currently selling the best. And I can see content. So obviously I don't have backend information on Sephora's site, but I could see that being a useful entry point for customers like myself that might feel overwhelmed by such a large product catalog and are really like, actually, where do I get started? And then Sephora's like, here's your helpful blog post on like the fragrance styles that are trending this month, or like our top selling hair care products. But like, I wouldn't see that working as well on like just a women's wear site, for example. Like no one really needs a blog post to be told like, I like this t-shirt best. So yeah, I think it does depend. That's where I'm going to end.
Yeah, I love that example, but I was, when you were saying about it, I was like, oh, that could be distracting or it could help. And then I thought, well,
Yeah,
I would hope that they are powering that via one of the personalization softwares that's tracking
Yes.
user intent and is going, this person's looked at 20 fragrances. Show her the blog about what's on trend, or something like that, rather than the person who's come in off the Google Shopping campaign ad for that perfume to buy it.
Yeah.
I'd hope the blog would disappear at that point, but that's untested. That's just hypothetical.
Yeah,
Me
we're just
hypothesizing.
hypothesizing. The
Yeah.
Sephora's website, in my opinion, doesn't work that well, so I doubt that they're doing that, Chloe. But that is very smart. You should email them.
We've got enough products. We've got a big enough name. We don't need to worry about it. Gentlemen, Thomas, Will, any thoughts on the role of blogs in conversion rate optimization for Mark Anthony?
Yeah, I think it comes down to almost entirely how well the person writing them understands the customer. And I can think of two really good examples with two clients of mine, where one of them sells solar panels for like residential installations, and the articles they have, they got a bunch of articles written up for them. The ones that they have talking about sustainability, green, all of that side of things virtually lead to nothing in terms of money in the bank. And all of the ones talking about, how the energy companies are ripping you off, how much money you can save, where there's direct benefit to people, they do drive conversions. And to me, there's a real lesson in that of, SEO, a part of it actually needs to be hyper focused, not on getting traffic, but on the user needs and the motivations behind why they come, which is why it actually needs to be a really integrated part of, not just something that's done in a silo out on its own. And, another client I have, they sell what I would consider at least luxury cutlery. Maybe it's mid to high end, but they have a bunch of, I won't say what they're doing, but they're making considerable revenue each month, driven purely by organic. But it's, if you think about it, if you're going to spend quite a lot of money on a cutlery set, you've obviously got some kind of an interest in whether it's dinner parties or it's sprucing up your home, and there's a kind of an aesthetic that you're going to be interested in. And so if you're talking from the perspective of your customer and what excites them about your product, much like the money saving side excites the solar purchases a lot more than the green stuff, and the making your home nice excites the cutlery people. If the content is commercially focused in that sense, I see very clear evidence that it can really drive conversions, and it can do so without you even needing ads if you do enough of it.
It comes back to the knowing the customer. I think your example about solar panels is so fascinating. I'm having a lot of conversations at the moment about how sustainability is no longer a USP. It's almost a hygiene factor. So like someone who's buying solar panels, either they care about the sustainability or they don't, but it's not what's brought them there. What's brought them there is even if it has brought them there, what they're interested in is the finance and the complexity of installing solar panels. They're not there to be told, pat on the head, well done, you're doing something for the planet, in
Well,
long form copy.
you can look at the wider environment of it. If people were motivated solely by the environmental element, the government wouldn't need to subsidize it so much. And there's clues in that. And same with the electric cars. And I just think understanding the wider environment that the business the business is situated in is actually how you're going to get that traffic that you wouldn't otherwise get, because those are the subjects and topics that people are, at least in the research stage of the purchase journey, that's what they're actually Googling and looking into.
Totally get where you're coming from here. Okay, so I just noticed the time, and I want to make sure we get chance to talk about this last thing, which I think is kind of it could potentially be the elephant in the room, or the most obvious thing we haven't talked about. This is the accessibility laws, requirements, etc., which is I'm sure you're all spending a lot of time dealing with at the moment. This was a statement Janice Thomas put on one of my posts about this webinar, saying, I feel like why accessibility features improve conversion is a pertinent topic right now. It makes good business sense regardless of the legal pressure. So Janice, as a brand managing director, is thinking, okay, if this makes it easier for people to check out, we should be doing it anyway, regardless of the legal. Are you finding that's coming? She's only one voice. So are you finding that's coming? Are you finding clients are wanting to talk to you about all of this? Thomas, you were the first to unmute. So I'll come to you first, but then I'm going to come to Will because Will hasn't spoken in a bit. So, and I want his perspective. So Thomas, what's your take on this?
I think it's really important for all the reasons, even just whether you want to be ethical or even just good business practice. But I think it's also worth pointing out. I mean, we recently designed a whole new website for a client, and nearly all of the feedback resulted in pulling back a lot of what we'd done to make it accessible in favor of what at least they perceive to be more brand adherent. And I think it's an interesting one. I think people
Sorry,
in
Thomas,
the
was that
game.
feedback from the brand or feedback from the testers and the customers?
No, the brand, the customer, the
Brand.
client, brand. Yeah.
So not the end user of the website,
No,
but the
no.
the sign-off
Yeah.
group. Okay.
Yes,
Wow.
exactly. And I think us in the space and in the industry, I think we really see the value of it, because it impacts everything. It can impact SEO, it can impact obviously conversions, which are extremely important. But I think without people, those sort of stakeholders that you're going to be dealing with to actually get sign off on some of these things, I think without them fully understanding that, it's not always going to get the mileage that it should.
I totally get where you're coming from, because it's quite a lot of giving up on things you would normally put in place if you take it full chunk all the way. Will, you having these sorts of conversations with people? Do you have a take on this?
No. It's interesting. I don't know if it's because we're a CRO agency and maybe people view this as something for their actual dev agency, the agency that kind of runs their website. But even US clients who've been dealing with this for years now, I don't think we've had a single conversation about accessibility and having to optimize the website for that. And so it's not something we've massively, we're aware of it. We've looked into it, and we're always looking for opportunities, but we still look at it as that, what we talked about earlier, really, with the purchase funnel devices. Most of what we're doing is looking for the bigger wins. And I think in this case, it's one of these things where, is it going to move the needle that much?
Janice's perspective is on the outlier perspective, as a brand who's seeing these two coming together to create better results for the business. Very intriguing. Christine, does your experience of this match up with Will's? Are you also not being talked to about it by your clients?
I'd say I'm not being talked to about it as much as I'd like. I did work with a client who was successfully sued. The person who filed the lawsuit won, and they had to pay a lot of money because they hadn't put proper alt text on their website. So I've seen it more from the SEO perspective, where there has been actual legal consequences, and this was for a US-based client. That being said, I agree with Janice's comment. I think that accessibility standards really can help conversion rate optimization, and it is something I try to raise to my clients. And one high-profile example that I saw recently that's not doing it right, and I'm surprised they haven't fixed this yet, is the Uniqlo web redesign. Fails a ton of accessibility standards. They've implemented this very strange, if you guys haven't seen it, I recommend looking at it, very strange menu format that has like no structure or like categorization to it, and it's like a little bit hard to find. The result being that screen readers couldn't read it properly. And I find menu bloat and proper menu hierarchy are critical for conversion rates, and often something I work with for my clients. So I think that's a great example of like such a win-win of improving accessibility and at the same time just improving your site design for everyone, because having a really responsive, easy to read and well-formatted menu is just so critical. So yeah, I think there's like a lot of little things like that as you dive into the accessibility world. Like proper button size, even like just things that seem small, but they're really best practice for everyone. And they will help your conversion rates.
As a now in my 40s and going blind person, as we all do when we reach a certain age, my tolerance for small text. I mean, like
Yeah.
I as a marketer, I now feel guilty for about the size of font I have used in the past, because I now realize I was excluding all the short-sighted people who were pretending they hadn't become short-sighted due to age and were now unable to read my leaflets, magazines, whatever it was I was producing. So yeah, I just anyway, glasses nightmare.
Just
No, I want
one
to.
thing.
We've got the very final question, so you may wrap this up into your final question, because I'm aware we are definitely going to finish on time today. I promise you.
Okay.
Final question for all of you is: what would your key takeaway from this be for the audience? We have, if they are, like, the title of this is how to increase your website conversion rates, the 2025 approach. What would your one critical piece of advice be around that? You can dive into something we've already talked about. You can go completely left field. I don't mind. But what would your key piece of advice be to them? You've got about a minute each on this. Will, I will come to you first, as I shut you up a second ago.
Yeah, I think it's, obviously speak to users, look into the data, get customer feedback, but just keep breaking things down by, like, what are we actually trying to do? So you would, like, saying we want to improve conversion rates is just a absolutely ridiculously massive question that has millions of potential opportunities and ways you could look at it. So that's why, go to the funnel, right? Find out, okay, add to cart is your worst performing area of the website. Now break that down by channels and devices and things, and find out, who are the actual users who have these problems, and then look at the heat maps and session recordings to find out what they're doing on these pages, and then speak to people, do user testing to find out why they're doing these things, and that will give you your answers. And, like, whenever you're running a test or something or making a change to the website, why? Like, what's the point of this? Right? We want to add
Awesome.
this video to the website.
Sorry,
Why?
Will.
Yeah.
That was well over a minute, and I've got to make enough
Oh,
time for
okay.
Christine and Thomas. But I love that point. Thank you. Thomas, your wrap up point, please.
Well, look, everything Will said, I completely agree with that. If I was to tie that in a bow, I guess it's segment on top of segmentation, and maybe to throw something else into the mix. I mentioned it earlier. I'm a huge fan of tracking the last viewed item before a particular action. I think there's big clues in that, and if you really want to lean into something like that, if you can start running analysis on the nature of the content that's contained within that, because if you have 1,000 products, it's very difficult as an individual to look at the last viewed elements on all of those products. But if you can analyze, and we like to do it with AI, I think that's probably the best way to do it, the sort of themes, subjects, and content sort of abstracted within those last viewed elements. So if it's FAQs, is it mostly about delivery returns? If it's descriptions, is it about style, elegance, comfort versus something else? And if you can start abstracting and summarizing the nature of the content people are looking at en masse, you're going to have a real strong foundation to create a content strategy around what you need to be talking about in the different sections of your website in order to drive that outcome that you want most.
Awesome. Thank you, Thomas. Loving your answer. And last but by no means least, Christine, you've got 1 minute because we're super tight on time.
I can do it. I'm just going to get super tactical and say, if you haven't done this recently, audit your site from the mobile view, check your home and collection pages. Are there shoppable products visible above the fold? If they're not, you need to fix that ASAP. Check your product pages. Is the add to cart button visible above the fold? If not, fix it. Go to your checkout and see, are there any fields that you can remove? Can you remove address line 2? Can you remove gift receipt or make it hidden? Anything you can do to streamline that mobile view and make it as easy as possible to find products without having to scroll far, I'd say you're winning.
Oh, I love that. A super duper checklist to finish us off. Well, look, thank you to Christine. Thank you to Thomas. Thank you to Will. You have all been awesome. Thank you, all of you, for tuning in to our session as well. What I have, hold on. I've lost my slide. There we go. That's what I wanted. So we are gonna be doing the next one of these in May. So you can sign up for that right now at webinar.ecommerceexplored.com. And in May, we're going to be talking about tech stack optimization, how to do it for growth and profit. We've got the brilliant tech stack optimizer, James Gerd, and also Derek Haney, who is also incredibly good at tech stack optimization, joining us. One guest TBC. And then in July, because we're skipping June, in July, we will be talking about using sustainability for growth, the role of products, returns, and re-commerce, which my plan for that evolves week by week at the moment with all the noise about those topics. So very much looking forward to those. You can sign up for both of those right now at webinar.ecommerceexplored.com. And very last thing to say is, you will see there are guests to be confirmed on these. And then after this, we've got a whole autumn series that we have not yet found any guests for at all. So if you fancy being a guest on the eCommerce Explored webinar, head to webinar.ecommerceexplored.com/get-involved, or you'll see a link to it in the header of that website, and get your application in. I would love to hear from you. Thank you all for joining us today. And thank you especially to the question askers and to Mark Anthony for saying thank you to us. Really appreciate your feedback, and have a brilliant rest of the day. Cheers. Bye.